Right, so thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Picking up where we left off last time. Last time I showed you this landmark, which is directly in front of us. This is the model, the copy or the replica of the old Charing Cross, which was built or set up on a site not far from here, about 200 yards further west. And this replica was put up in 1865. And it's a fairly accurate copy. It's made from the other surviving Eleanor Crosses in different parts of the country. Anyway, what I'm going to do is move off from here, and I'm going to take you from here, from this cross, to the site of the original Charing Cross, which is about 200 yards further forward. So what I've done now is that I'm outside Charing Cross Station. That's the Charing Cross Station Hotel, and I'm in the Strand, and I'm walking westwards, further towards Charing Cross, and just take a last look at what was put up here. So we call it the Eleanor Cross after Eleanor of Castile, who was the wife of King Edward I. She was enormously popular with the people of England at the time. She was Spanish. She was actually the daughter of the King of Spain, or the King of Castile at the time. We're talking about the 1200s. And the Infanta de Castilla. Well, the English had great difficulty trying to pronounce that. They didn't speak Spanish, they spoke English, so they referred to her as the Elephant and Castle. And there were many pubs and taverns and hostelries named after Elephant and Castle, and one of the most famous of these was the Coaching Inn at a place called Newington Butts on the south bank of the River Thames. And that was a very famous coaching inn for hundreds and hundreds of years. They pulled it down in Victorian times. But it was called Elephant and Castle, and that's the name of that sort of general area. King Edward I, one of our really great kings, he was the man who sort of organised our legal system and got Parliament properly, well and truly launched. And he reigned from 1272 to 1307. He was also the man who completed the conquest of Wales and made a half-successful attempt to conquer Scotland. Actually, it was his son, Edward II, who screwed that one up. But anyway, that's another story. A little while ago, I realised, in fact, that all the native British can claim descent from King Edward I. They're all remote descendants of Edward I. How do you work that one out? Well, it's very simple really. If you reckon that there are 4 generations in every century, when you get to the age of 25 you start producing your own children. So there are 4 generations in a century, and if you go back over 7 centuries, that's 28 generations. Now everyone has 2 parents, and then they have 4 grandparents, and then they have 8 great-grandparents, and then 28 times that, if you go back over 7 centuries, comes to over 1 billion. I mean, you can work this out for yourself on a piece of paper, if you like, if you don't believe me, but it does. Now, what the point about that is that the population of England at the time was about 3 or perhaps 4 million at the very most, which is only a tiny fraction of 1 billion. So what's going on? Well, it means simply that the same person is the ancestor of many others. For instance, King Charles is descended from Queen Victoria both by his father and by his mother. But if you look at it the other way, you can see that in those days families were usually very large. Many children didn't survive till adulthood, so you might have a mother with 10 pregnancies and only 4 children would reach adulthood. And of course you also had the law of primogeniture, which means everything goes to the eldest son, and the rest, well, have to make do as best they can. So the younger children and the younger children of the younger children and the younger children of the younger children of the younger children eventually sort of find their way into the ranks of the ordinary people. But, as I say, if you want to pay a genealogist, a professional genealogist, you can possibly trace your ancestry back to British royalty. So that's why I say that all the British people are descended from King Edward I and Queen Eleanor, of course. And of course they're just even more strongly, you can put the argument for all being descendants of William the Conqueror. And in fact, everyone in Western Europe is a descendant of Charlemagne. And everyone in Arabia, in the Middle East, can claim to be descendants of Muhammad. And everybody in India can claim to be descendants of the Buddha. And everyone in China can be claim to be descendants of Confucius. So that's really what I'm getting at, what I'm driving at. Now, we're just making steady progress toward the site of the original Charing Cross. And it's on a traffic island directly ahead of us. And I'll point it out to you when we get there. Not so far away. So what we'll do is cross over at the lights like good little citizens, following the rules, not wishing to get knocked down. It's just immediately in front of us. If you look, you can see now the statue of King Charles I on horseback. That's what's called an equestrian statue. An equestrian statue is very simply the statue of somebody riding a horse. That's all it means, equestrian statue. Now, here we have, as you can see, a red light, so I'll press the button to give it some encouragement to change over. And we'll just wait, and then I'll talk a bit more once we actually get up to the plinth of the statue. So just let the traffic go by. Trafalgar Square, Nelson's Column, National Gallery, double-decker buses, taxis, cars all over the place. Busy is what you call it round here. Actually one of the busiest parts of London. And this again, oh, we can cross. Fantastic. Let's take the chance while we've got it. Otherwise it may not come back for a while. We had the right of way there. I don't know what he's doing, idiot. Oh, God. Now then, again. Right, green light. Right, so here you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the equestrian statue of King Charles I, reigned from 1625 till he was beheaded in 1649, and it stands on the site of the old Charing Cross, which was knocked down in 1647. It had been put up in 1291 in honour of Queen Eleanor, who died the previous year. And I say we're right in the centre of London now, and what I'm doing, we've got some people here who are taking photographs and videos. Oh, there's somebody taking a video of me, so I'll take a video of them. There we go. Right, now then, let me just take round here. Oh, that is Nelson's Column. This is Trafalgar Square, and there's so much about Trafalgar Square I'll have to do this in a separate video. Beyond the Column you have the National Gallery, and you have the Church of St Martin in the Fields. Now, 800 years ago, you wouldn't imagine it, would you? But this was just a quiet little village between Westminster and the City of London. It was out in the open fields. The parish church was called the Church of St Martin in the Fields, and it was all open countryside. And then this was the place where Edward the First set up the cross as the village cross. So anyway, Trafalgar Square is here. Pan round here, you've got the Church of St Martin in the Fields. Talk about that later. Down here we have the Strand, and the Strand will, if you take it far enough, will take you all the way to Aldwych and then Fleet Street right into the City of London. I'll do that on the other tours. Pan round again and you will see Northumberland Avenue. Now, Northumberland Avenue, originally here there was Northumberland House, the home of the Dukes of Northumberland for several centuries, and they pulled that down in Victorian times in order to make this road to connect with the Victoria Embankment and the River Thames, and that's directly ahead of us. Pan round again and you'll see the street we call Whitehall, and that will take you all the way down to Westminster, the Abbey and Parliament, and you can see in the distance the Tower of Big Ben. Well, actually you can't, it's not the Tower of Big Ben, it's officially known as the Elizabeth Tower. Big Ben is the name of the bell, and that is, the bell itself is sort of suspended from the pointed roof right up at the top, and it takes 344 steps to climb all the way up. They're going to install a lift, they say, one of these days. I don't know, I'd believe that when it happens. But anyway, that is Whitehall. Then we pan round again, and here directly in front of us under scaffolding, so you can't really see it, is the Admiralty Arch, which is being transformed into a luxury hotel. And if you go through the Admiralty Arch, you come into the Mall, and you can walk for a distance of exactly 1 kilometre, and that will take you up to the Victoria Memorial and to Buckingham Palace. Anyway, you have to go that way, and we'll do it, but not now, because we just have to stay focused on one thing at a time. Turn all the way around here, and you can see the roads that will take you up to Piccadilly Circus, which is the centre of London's shopping and entertainment district. We call it the centre of the West End. And then we come back here and we're back in Trafalgar Square. So now let's talk a bit about King Charles I and about his statue, because this is really quite important. It wouldn't be in such an important location if he weren't a person of great importance in British history. The Stuart dynasty, we had the Tudor dynasty, died out with Queen Elizabeth I in 1603. So after that we had her cousin James VI of Scotland, James Stuart, came to be King of England. Queen Elizabeth had no children, being the Virgin Queen, so it was her cousin who inherited the throne. And the Stuart dynasty were kings of this country right up until 1714. Now, the Stuarts liked to spend their money, but they didn't really understand how England was properly governed, and they had big problems with Parliament, the building further down, and I'll talk more about Parliament later on. But King Charles I tried to raise money in ways which were not strictly legal, and Parliament objected, and eventually they had a civil war. In fact, we had 2 civil wars. The first civil war started in 1642, and there were several bloody battles, and eventually it all ended in a bloody mess in 1648, and the king surrendered and was put in a place called the Isle of Wight, Carisbrooke Castle, and eventually made various promises that he would rule according to the rules, the laws of England. And of course, once he got his own way, then he went back on his promises, so they started the Second Civil War, and that lasted from 1648 until he was captured again, and he was brought back to London. He was put on trial for a charge of treason. He was found guilty of the offence. That's hardly a surprise to anyone. And then he was brought back to the grounds of his own palace and he was beheaded just outside Banqueting House. You can't really, or you can just about make it. If you know what you're looking at, it's just directly in front of you, but don't worry if you can't, because I'll do this all again in future videos. Anyway, this is Whitehall, and this is where King Charles I was beheaded on the 30th of January 1649. Right, so after that we had the parliamentary rule. We had a republic of sorts. It was called the Commonwealth, and the British people decided they didn't really like the parliamentary rule, so eventually what we did was bring back the king. Now at this time, we're talking about the mid-1600s, Westminster, which was a city in its own right, had been given a charter by King Henry VIII in 1540, and the city of London had spread out in different directions. It was all built up area by this time, so it was no longer open fields. And so we had the cross here, and that was pulled down in 1647 by the Parliamentary Army because they didn't like anything to do with royalty, so it was just left in open space. I think they built a fish shop here for a while. But anyway, in 1660, when the king came back, he published the Act of Indemnity and Oblivion, which meant to say that if you'd supported the parliamentary armies, you would be forgiven, and people would just forget all about your crimes and misdemeanors. Not everyone was included in the Act of Oblivion, and some people who had been, those who had signed the king's death warrant, the death warrant of King Charles I, had to be dealt with. And so all those who had signed, these were people like Oliver Cromwell. There was no point dealing with him, he was dead. But Colonel John Harrison, he was one of the Fifth Monarchy men. He belonged to some sort of religious cult, really, I think we'd call it today, expecting the Fifth Monarchy. Who were the previous four monarchies? Well, they were Babylon, Persia, Greece and Rome. And Colonel John Harrison imagined that once you'd killed the king, then you'd produce the fifth monarchy, which would be the kingdom of God on earth. That didn't quite happen as he expected it. But anyway, after the king came back, he was put on trial for his life. And surprise, surprise, he was found guilty and sentenced to be hanged, drawn and quartered at the site of Charing Cross. And this was the place where he suffered in October of 1660. Hanged, drawn and quartered. You don't really want to know, well, I suppose you do want to know what's all that's all about. Hanged, drawn and quartered, it means you're hanged by the neck, but not until you're dead. That's until you are almost dead, in which case they'd cut you down, and then they would take your body, they'd cut off your privy members, and then they'd cut your body open and they'd pull out all the intestines, and by this time you really would be dead, don't worry. And then they would chop your head off, and they would cut the body into 4 pieces, each limb. And then they put the limbs, they'd be sort of stuck over various gates of London, I suppose. The head would be put on Temple Bar, and that was an example. Don't rebel against the king. So that was John Harrison in 1660. And then, later on, they produced this statue. Now this, oh, can't see it. Yes, you can, just about. What the bloody hell is that racket going on? Oh, no. It's going to be very difficult to compete with that. I'll try. Can you hear me? Right, good. So you had the statue here by a man called Herbert Le Sueur, Frenchman. And he produced this statue in 1633 to stand in the Piazza of Covent Garden. It didn't stand here, but when the Civil War broke out, the parliamentary armies wanted it, they wanted to turn it into scrap, so they hid it away, they buried it for years and years and years, and then they dug it up after King Charles II returned. And then in 1675 they put it on this plinth. Now the plinth itself, they say, we can't guarantee this, was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, the man who designed designed St Paul's Cathedral and many other churches and public buildings in London. And they say also that it was carved by Who are these bloody people? Meow, 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 meow. Well, this is London, ladies and gentlemen. People come here to make a racket and a lot of noise. I just hope you can hear what I'm saying. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, this is what you have to put up with, I suppose. Anyway, this is Charing Cross, and the reason I'm pointing it out to you is because this is the official centre of London. All the distances to and from London are measured here. Now, it's 344 miles from London to Edinburgh. London is spread out over some 607 square miles. So where do they mean exactly? Well, I'll tell you exactly the point they're talking about. It's just behind the statue, and it is just down here, ladies and gentlemen. This is the centre of London. As I say, all the distances, this is the official centre of London. This is where all the distances are measured from. And this is Trafalgar Square. I think this is an Irish regiment, ladies and gentlemen. I have an idea this looks to me like an Irish. I can't recognise it at the moment. I'll have to go back and do some research. I wasn't expecting to see them, but maybe they're coming out here for some special reason. Anyway, just head round here. Before we leave, something to point out to you. It's the Royal Coat of Arms here. Stuart, you can see the weather has really damaged it over the centuries, but there it is, what's left of it. And down here, very interesting, they've put up wreaths. These wreaths are in commemoration of King Charles I. You have a wreath here, and it is from the Order of the Crown of Stuart. And here you have another one, which is from the Memorial of Merit of from the Memorial of Merit of King Charles the Martyr. King Charles I is a martyr in the Church of England, not the Roman Catholic Church, but in the Church of England they regard him as a martyr. So here we have it, ladies and gentlemen. As I say, ahead of us we have Trafalgar Square. Now, there's so much to talk about in Trafalgar Square that I shan't talk about it here. I'll do it on another occasion. I've gone on for over 20 minutes anyway, and I think that's already quite enough. But I'll tell you that Dr. Samuel Johnson, the man who wrote the first, or compiled the first comprehensive dictionary of the English language in 1755, he is quoted as saying that the full tide of human existence you'll see at Charing Cross. And if you can see the racket around here, you'll believe it, ladies and gentlemen. This is London. London here, and this is the 5th of February in the year 2025. And as I say, I'll sign off for the time being, and I'll come back in the next video. I'll treat you to the exploration of Trafalgar Square. But for the time being, I'll say bye-bye. Bye-bye, people.